And now, What's Great About America with John Stossel.
One more thing that's great about America is that Americans are free to speak. We can say just about anything. It says so right here in the Constitution. Congress shall pass no law abridging the freedom of speech. This makes a difference. It allows us to say even offensive things. But wait a second. Why is that good?
Don't fear the terrorists. They're mothers and fathers.
Don't fear the terrorists? Is it good that people are free to say such ridiculous and hurtful things?
Radical Christianity is just as threatening as radical Islam.
No, I didn't say go ahead.
Is it good that this Code Pink protester can rudely accost Karl Rove?
You lied to take us to war. You ruined the country.
She intruded on his book signing, and she's not arrested.
Here's the deal.
The comfort I take is that you're going to rot in hell.
Oh, stop it.
Let people have it out, if you will.
The author of What's So Great About America argues that it is good that America has
A high degree of tolerance for sarcasm, abuse, blasphemy, criticism, even at the
These sound like bad things. Sarcasm, blasphemy.
But we allow them in a free society because they can also have a beneficial impact. They hold leaders to account, and that's very important in a democratic society.
No more hate speech on our campus!
Canada is democratic, but speech is limited.
It's against the law in Canada to publish anything, quote, likely to expose a person to hatred or contempt. Likely to. That's a maybe, future tense thing. You haven't even done anything wrong. You just might in the future. Might do what? Expose someone to feelings? That's such a goofy law. Anyone could be convicted.
To make a kinder society.
But literally any one of us would cause hurt feelings to someone.
These Canadian students said Ann Coulter should not be allowed to speak.
I was right there in the room. A crowd of 2,000 folks crushed against the door. Their Facebook page talked about throwing things, hurting her, getting arrested. But that's just mob violence. That's for the cops to deal with. What was far more concerning to me was that the university's vice president wrote Ann Coulter a letter in advance, threatening her with criminal prosecution if she gave her speech.
Levant knows all about Canadian speech prosecution because he was the editor of this little magazine which reported on those Mohammed cartoons that led to riots around the world.
We wanted to show our readers what the fuss was about.
But he soon discovered that in Canada, the fuss was about him.
One day, a registered letter arrived at my office from something called the Alberta Human Rights Commission. It's a government agency, and they said I had received a complaint against me for hate speech. I was ordered to come down to an interrogation, and for 90 minutes, the most bizarre thing happened. A government bureaucrat grilled me on my religious and political views. And if I gave the wrong answer, I would be subject to fines or other punishments.
And you brought a camera. You videotaped.
Yeah, I knew it was going to be so offensive to our liberal sensibilities.
Are there other owners?
I went home and I uploaded some of these video clips to YouTube, and that weekend it became the 5th most watched video on all the internet.
The video's dull, but almost 1 million people have watched it.
Do you think the average person looking at those...
It's good news if that means that people don't like the fact that
there were 15 government bureaucrats and lawyers on my case. I was a stimulus program for lawyers for almost 3 years. I was being prosecuted for a hate crime.
Canada has a free speech law.
We sort of have an asterisk next to our freedom of speech in our Constitution. There's no asterisk on the First Amendment in the States. But in Canada, all of our freedoms are subject to reasonable compromise.
And you can argue forever about what's reasonable.
And that's one of the problems with such a vague rule as that. These censorship provisions can become political weapons to censor certain sides of the argument. I was just showing the truth. These cartoons were published in Denmark, caused some riots. 240 people were killed in the riots. That's the news. If the news can hurt someone's feelings, and that's against the law, nothing's safe.
The news is safe in America. There is censorship. Comedy Central censored South Park's depiction of Muhammad. But this was just one frightened private company that chose to censor its own product. But when government censors, no one may speak. In Canada, government censors selectively.
couple of comedians in Toronto hired an airplane to tow a banner across Toronto saying Jesus sucks.
That upset one Canadian.
He filed a complaint with the Human Rights Commission calling that hate speech. He was thrown out.
But the Islam case was pursued.
I myself have been subject to 5 defamation claims, 3 human rights complaints for standing up for freedom of speech.
Eventually, you won.
Well, I don't know if I'd call it winning. I still had my $100,000 in legal fees, and the imam who complained against me didn't have to spend a penny. All the lawyers and the bureaucrats were paid for by taxpayers.
Some places, speaking out can get you killed. When Chinese students criticized the powerful, the government killed hundreds of them. We don't know what happened to this student who courageously, temporarily, stopped the tanks. He hasn't been seen since. In Russia, even the richest man in the country can't speak out. Here he is, Mikhail Khodorkovsky. He dared challenge Vladimir Putin. Now he sits in jail. In Austria, this British writer was jailed for a year for writing a book that denied the Holocaust. France fined the actress Brigitte Bardot $10,000 for inciting racial hatred because she wrote a book that complained about Islamification in France. In Venezuela,
Last month, a pro-government gang attacked Globovision.
Government shuts down TV stations that criticize. But in America, we have free speech. That allowed these citizen journalists to uncover fraud at Acorn. Could the Acorn sting have been pulled off in other countries? The man who promoted it says probably not.
They don't have a First Amendment in Britain. They don't have a First Amendment in Canada.
The First Amendment allows citizen journalism and all sorts of citizen speech.
You work for us.
People are free to criticize members of government, and they do. They get right in politicians' faces.
You and your cronies in the government do this kind of stuff all the time.
It's one more thing that's great about America. Coming up, is this what our freedoms add up to?
Ladies and gentlemen, Albert Cadabra, the human of the blockhead.
A nation consumed with crass commercialism?
Got our new smoothie.
That's next, when What's Great About America continues.